Hey guys, it's Catie Harris from Philly Wellness Center, and today we're talking about bloating and what causes bloating. We're going to make a connection between bloating and histamine, actually. So, why does histamine affect digestion and cause bloating? So, if you have bloating and you don't understand, you're doing everything right, let's there's a connection here that we can make. So you have mast cells in the gut, right? So your gut lining is full of mast cells, and mast cells are basically immune sensors that release histamine when they perceive a threat. So if these mast cells are unstable because they are under stress, or there's an infection, or you have some food sensitivities, or you have membrane instability, then they're going to release histamine. And sometimes they release histamine at times that just aren't great, right? So that histamine affects the way that your gut functions, sometimes even without food allergies being present. So a lot of people get these food allergies tested and it comes up negative, but you're still miserable because you're bloating every time you eat or don't even eat. You might wake up in the morning and feel bloated and you haven't even eaten anything. So histamine and stomach acid, there's a connection here too. So histamine stimulates H2 receptors in the stomach, which triggers acid production. Too much histamine equals too much acid, which can irritate that stomach lining. It can contribute to reflux or feel like acid bloating, like acidic bloating. So too little acid after chronic histamine disruption can lead to food fermenting in the stomach, which then causes gas, bloating, and belching. That's why sometimes people will take H2 blockers or proton pump inhibitors and initially feel better, but it doesn't solve the problem, right? Because it stops too much acid, which can irritate the stomach lining, but it doesn't fix the problem of histamine release. And now you're getting, other problems, other manifestations of it. And you need stomach acid. You have to have stomach acid to break down carbohydrates and proteins because if you don't, like I said, if you have too little acid, then your food moves into the small intestine where it then becomes attacked by inflammation. You get an inflamed small bowel, and then you get bacterial overgrowth because basically bacteria has to come and digest the food that wasn't destroyed by acid. And then you don't get the amino acids that you need to do all the functions in the body that you needed to do. So it's this big catch-22. So initially that reducing the stomach acid might feel better and you're like, oh, this is great, this is working. But then chronic low acid turns into a whole nother slew of problems. So ultimately, we need to get to the root cause of the problem. And the problem is the histamine. And we need to look at why histamine's not clearing. All right. So histamine is also involved in gut motility. So histamine influences how fast or slow food moves through the intestines. So in some people, it speeds things up. You can get diarrhea, urgency. In others, it will slow things down and you get constipation or distension. Either way, a disrupted motility means bacteria overgrowth and fermentation, which produces gas and bloating, right? So histamine-rich foods, many foods naturally contain histamine, especially fermented foods, spinach, tomatoes, avocados, alcohol. I mean, most of those things are good for you, right? So you would think, oh, I eat spinach salad every day, and yet now I have bloating. Like, what's going on? And that could be part of the issue. Others trigger mast cells to release histamine. So there's two different things here. You have foods that contain histamine, you've got actual histamine itself, and then the mast cells that trigger histamine. So things that trigger histamine are citrus, chocolate, any type of additives. So anything basically that comes in a box, food in a box that's got additives that can trigger mast cells to release histamine. And then when histamine builds up in the gut and it's not broken down properly, bloating is the earliest and most common symptoms. So what are these breakdown pathways? So histamine in the gut is broken down by an enzyme called DAO, diamine oxidase enzyme. If your DAO is low from genetics, from gut damage, from alcohol, from certain medications, then histamine will linger and can cause gut irritation, gas, and bloating. Systemic histamine is also broken down by an enzyme called HNMT, which depends on methylation. So if your methylation is sluggish, your histamine levels are going to rise. So there's two separate and maybe a combination of both. So you could have low DAO and also issues with HNMT, and it could be genetics. So you could do a simple like 3x4 blueprint. So 3x4 genetics will give you a blueprint of what your genes look like, and they'll look at DAO and HNMT. And these aren't determinants of, you're just destined to have bloating. This will tell us, like, if you have a gene deletion, that's not the final word. That's just like, okay, well, I know I have this gene deletion. So, if let's say HNMT, let's say I don't have the ability, or I have reduced ability of this enzyme to break down histamine, so my methylation is sluggish. What could you do? Well, you can increase B9, B12. You can take large doses of it, betaine, creatine, choline. You can take these things that will supplement and help facilitate your methylation system. So there's a lot of things that we can do that are relatively inexpensive to make up for any kind of gene deletion, or if a gene just isn't working as properly. So it's actually very helpful to get something like this. It's not the final word. It's not your destiny. It's not like a death sentence. It's just very helpful to know which genes that you need to support. So bloating from histamine isn't just about the gut. It's often a signal of mast cell activation syndrome or histamine intolerance, where the entire system is overloaded. So that's why people don't just get bloating. They also get rashes and headaches and anxiety, or they complain of asthma triggers, bladder flares, fatigue, all of that kind of stuff. So histamine bloating happens because mast cells in the gut release histamine. Okay, so that's just, we know that. It then alters stomach acid, gut motility, and the way foods are processed. So if histamine isn't broken down efficiently, either because you have low DAO in the gut, or you have sluggish methylation, it builds up and causes this distension, discomfort, and reactions to foods that might even seem healthy. So there's lots of easy ways. We can also check the methylation system just by checking a very inexpensive blood level called homocysteine. So homocysteine will tell us if the methylation system is overworking or it's not working hard enough. We can take a look at that. And that should be a routine test for everybody, but apparently it's not. But it's super simple to get that ordered, and you can see exactly where you are with your methylation system. So hopefully this was helpful. If you are suffering from bloating, it could be, and there's lots of reasons for lots of things to happen, but I would absolutely explore the possibility of histamine, some sort of genetic enzyme issue, all these other things, diet for sure, that could explain the bloating and potentially excess histamine, or histamine that's not being cleared from the system as a potential cause. So if this was helpful to you, be sure to hit subscribe and let us know in the comments.